Great news! There's a quick way you can save money. Switch to Geico. Geico could help you get great coverage at a great price, and it only takes 15 minutes to see if you could save 15% or more on car insurance. Go to geico.com today and see how much you could save.
Caught Offside with Andrew Gunling and JJ Devaney.
Oh, yes. Caught Offside from the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Andrew Gunling. JJ Devaney, what's up, brother?
Remarkably chipper, oh yes, considering yesterday's events.
This is not, contrary to what many people say about this podcast, it is not a Tottenham and or Liverpool podcast.
It's not, though, but people care about how you feel. And yesterday, the fact that
Really? Well, I checked my mentions on Twitter very briefly. A few of them were horrifying, and I said, nah, I'm good. I think I'm just going to log off Twitter for the remainder of today. What a show. What a Champions League podcast we have coming up for you. Obviously, we're going to talk about Real Madrid PSG. A little brief bits on City's victory. Well, loss yesterday, but overall win.
Doesn't matter.
Liverpool finishing the job against Porto. And, of course, what transpired yesterday at Wembley, Tottenham and Juve, which was, as you put it to me before we started recording today, just a classic Champions League tie. And we're going to do so in mere moments with Dan Kilpatrick. You might see some of his work at ESPN FC. He's a Tottenham correspondent for FC, and he also hosts the Tottenham Way podcast, which is excellent. If you are a Spurs fan, I recommend it. So we'll talk with him because misery loves company, and I could sure use some. I think I have you. We talk about this all the time because, you know, this is a.
Do you want me to just read the tweet?
This podcast, more than anything, is a fan podcast. We're not all about, tactical breakdowns and things. This is one fan to another, so we talk about this stuff all the time. I think that now becomes my new answer to the question that we get asked all the time. What's your worst loss as a Spurs fan? I think that was it. The way I felt yesterday after that game ended was just. I'm not going to say it was USA Trinidad. Because that, I don't know if anything will ever top that.
Because that had an element of surrealism to it.
Right. But
going out to Juventus in the last 16 of the Champions League has reality in it.
But it was just a stinging blow. I think it's my new answer to that question.
4:50 p.m. yesterday.
Yeah, let's relive it.
Andrew Gunling texts me, I really don't know if I've ever felt worse after a Tottenham game. I mean, pause. They had that. God, just brutal. Now, right in there, you have the words, which are classic Gundling watchwords. Worse, Tottenham, they had that. God and brutal. I mean, it's Gundling bingo right there.
Yeah.
The depression session begins.
Hit all the high points there. Well, but even before that, I think the texts that I sent to you that were maybe even more prescient was, it's funny sometimes how you almost feel like a fan base and a team are so in tune with one another. So Spurs go up 1-0, and they are bossing the game. Well, the first half, certainly. Juve, we'll talk about it.
They bossed it for an hour.
Juve made some crucial adjustments in the second half, and it changed things in one bleeping window. But yeah, essentially, the first goal goes in for Higuain, and right away I text you, uh-oh.
Yeah.
And I think it was the thought felt by every Spurs fan, and JJ, and I think this bore out on the field. I think it was what the team felt.
Yeah, which is really disappointing, but not uncommon for teams that a blip or a potential problem turns into a meltdown. And that is what happened. I remember Pep Guardiola talking about the Liverpool game and saying, we lose the first goal, fine, but we must be calm. We can't go on and lose another one. And Spurs just stopped. Some players switched off. Shape, crucially, was changed by Davinson Sanchez chasing Higuain and pulling out and creating this massive gap. Eric Dyer allowed Dybala to breeze past him. Eric Dyer was at a trot.
I mean, I think it was more than just him.
And Trippier, too. Never read it.
And Ben Davies played him onside, and I thought Davinson Sanchez was out of position. A lot of guys broke down on that final goal in order for that to happen.
Where for an hour, they were perfect.
This is the thing about being in the Champions League, but not just being in the Champions League, playing a knockout stage match against a team like Juventus. Every day when I come into work, I take the West Side Highway from the Sawmill, and there's a bridge you go over called the Henry Hudson Bridge, and there is a speed trap there, and I know it, and it's there every single day. There's always a state trooper who is parked at the same spot. I drive that way into work every day, 365 days a year. Every day I make sure I check. But JJ, if you do it 364 days out of 365, that's pretty good. But he's always there. And the one day you don't, you will get burned. Spurs played this over 180 minutes of this against Juventus. They were fantastic. They were the better side.
Okay.
But if you're going against Juve, that one breakdown, if you're only better than them for 175 out of the 180 minutes, that's not enough. You have to be perfect against them for the full 180. And Tottenham had one stretch in the first leg where they gave up 2 goals in the blink of an eye, and to their credit, they bounced back and they made a fight out of it. And then, again, one stretch in the second leg. 3 minutes we're talking about. But that's it. That's it. If you shut off for that, if you lose focus, if you forget about that cop car parked there for just one day, he will burn you. He will get you the ticket. And Juve did that to Spurs yesterday. I want to say it's a teaching moment, and I can't wait to ask Dan Kilpatrick for his thoughts on this, because I've heard a lot about experience and Tottenham's lack of experience coming back to bite them in this. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't think that's true. How much experience does this team need? They're the only team in England that's been a part of the last 2 title races. They lost a cup final to Chelsea. Last year, they lost to Chelsea at Wembley in the semifinals of the FA Cup. They were in the Champions League last season, where they got a lesson in that you can't take any opponent for granted. I mean, how many times do we need to say the same line? Oh, well, they just don't have experience. Well, this was a teachable moment. No, it's 3 years now where Tottenham has been a really good club, one of the best in Europe. The teachable moments are over. The moral victories are over. I don't take moral victories away. I don't take a learnable moment away from what happened at Wembley Stadium yesterday. That was just pure disappointment. There's no moral victory to be gained from that.
I don't talk about moral victories. I don't talk about experience. I talk about switching off, lack of concentration. And I think that Trippier, Dyer, Sanchez are going to do that in any game if that's the case. They switched off. It just happened.
There was one other thing that I saw after the game. You clearly saw, because you emailed me straight away and said, oh, we have to have this in the podcast. And I'm curious to play this, and I'm curious for your thoughts. This was Chiellini after the match talking about Spurs.
It's the history of the Tottenham. They always created many chances and scored so much, but at the end they miss always something to arrive at the end. We believe in the history. I think also yesterday and in the first game between Real and Paris, the history it's important, and with the experience it's important. And tonight we use our skill and arrive at the win.
I want to hate him for saying that, but I don't know that you can say that he's wrong.
Well, if you're asking me, is he a more experienced and historical defender than Davinson Sanchez or Kieran Trippier? Well, then yes. But I still put it down to losing concentration. I don't think there was a whole weight of history on the shoulders of Kieran Trippier that meant he didn't see Dybala make that run and didn't track him and put his hand up instead of going with him. I don't think it's that. But if he's talking about, and I'm going to say, obviously English is not his first language, but I extrapolated from that the experience gleaned of playing regularly at the cold face of European soccer, which teams like Juventus and Real Madrid do, gives you a hardening and an experience that means when you go 1-0 down away, already down on 2 away goals, you don't lose your head. That's what I take from it.
Yeah, I suppose.
And it seemed when he talked specifically about the history of Tottenham, no disrespect, but what history is he referring to? Spurs aren't ever at the business end. Twice in the last 30 years.
Well, I think that's what he's referring to. This is not...
So he's referring to Harry Redknapp's Spurs.
No, I think he's saying that this is like with PSG...
Is he referring to the Premier League?
No, he makes an analogy to what happened with PSG and Real Madrid. That PSG, Tottenham, these are clubs that you don't typically find at the end of Champions League competitions, in the semis or even in the quarters. These are not clubs that are used to those situations. I think that's what he means. I mean, I don't want to speak for him or get into his head, but I think he's saying that we believe, Juventus is used to this. Real Madrid is used to this. Tottenham, PSG, these clubs are not used to these situations, and I think that speaks a lot to what he's trying to get at there.
Yeah, I mean, Liverpool are used to being at the business end, but I don't think if Andrew Robertson makes a mistake in the next game that necessarily he won't make a mistake because of the weight of history of Liverpool behind him, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and look, the one thing for Juventus fans or Tottenham haters that listen to this, I don't want to make this all about Tottenham's lapse in concentration and just say that Juve barely, had no business winning this. I'm not saying that either. I mean, look, Juventus probably. They missed a penalty in the first leg, which could have been a crucial third goal. They probably should have been awarded a penalty in the first half of this game when Jan Vertonghen took Douglas Costa down in the box. So Juventus, they were also good. This was a very sometimes I feel like we dig too deep to find meanings behind things. Why can't it sometimes just be that one good team played another good team and somebody has to win? I mean, I don't know.
Why can't we put it that the connoisseurs of defending, Barzagli, Bonucci, Chiellini were the three amigos. Now Bonucci has since departed, but they were synonymous with this kind of game, getting what you needed and then defending manfully. Buffon, and that's exactly what happened. Chiellini was a colossus, Andrew. When I'll tell you,
yes and no. In the second half, yes, he had a huge clearance.
He was wonderful in the first half.
I mean, there were moments where Harry Kane was, I thought, bossing him around. The play where Kane he blows by Chiellini, gets around Buffon, and then just puts the shot into the side netting. I mean, that could have been huge.
Oh, sure,
right there.
Yeah, but there's also the moment where when Spurs needed the goal to take it to extra time, Son gets it on the left hand side, centres a low ball in, and it's if that's the Premier League, that is waiting for a Harry Kane tap in, and who comes across out of nowhere is Chiellini to cover it, which is just unbelievable. Also, as well, I think Allegri made a mistake in how he started, putting Costa and Barzagli on the same side with Son there, because Costa's not going to do the work. He's not going to get back in time. He's not defensively minded enough. And Barzagli, who is, let's be honest, a veteran and looked every inch of it, putting him out there on the right-hand side was absolute madness. And Son went at him. And the change that Allegri made, that everyone applauded, bringing in Lichtsteiner should have started. Right? It wasn't so much great tactics by Allegri, but rather remedying a mistake he'd made from the start.
That's true. Juve were probably, in some respects, fortunate to only have been one down at halftime.
Sure.
You could say that they even maybe should have had a penalty go against them on a handball in the box.
Where Chiellini fell over that?
Yeah.
Nah, I don't think you're not going to give that. He's already on the floor. He's on the floor.
And he swiped at it with his hand.
No, he didn't. He tried to get up.
He certainly did.
It was incidental contact, and Kane continued. Well, I don't know.
Well, that's all right.
It was such a wonderful night at Wembley.
But what you were saying before is what made it fun, in that Harry Kane right now is among the greatest strikers in the world. Chiellini is among the greatest center halves in the world. And they just went at it. And both guys were good. Both guys had their moments.
It was a ding-dong battle.
Yeah. I think one of the things also that made this so tough, what about the end? Off the inside of the post, kind of hovers along the line. If Lamella's there, a split half